DA leader John Steenhuisen has vowed that his party would not support ActionSA's Herman Mashaba to be elected mayor of the city of Johannesburg come Monday. Addressing the media and supporters earlier today, Steenhuisen said Mashaba's election as mayor and for the opposition parties to garner more than 50% of the vote to achieve a majority was highly dependent on the support of the EFF. He says his party would not vote alongside the EFF despite the numbers they would bring to allow opposition parties to keep the ANC out of power. Joining me now is DA spokesperson for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, that's Cilliers Brink. Mr. Brink, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Now, as the DA, you've resolved to put forward your own mayoral candidate for Johannesburg, which signals that you will not support ActionSA leader Herman Mashaba for mayor. Talk us through the talks that you've had so far.
So let me just distinguish the two metros that we have been having talks with ActionSA and other parties, and that is Tshwane and Johannesburg. In Tshwane, it is quite simple to form a coalition between the parties that have participated in the negotiations, the main opposition parties, the DA, ActionSA, the Freedom Front Plus, ACDP, COPE, and so forth. In Tshwane, those parties together will have a 50% plus one majority, which is needed to run an effective government, pass budgets, appoint senior officials, and so forth. That is not the case in Johannesburg. In Johannesburg, there is no, if you clobber those parties together that I've just mentioned, there is no 50 plus 1% a majority there.
Right.
The IFP and the Patriotic Alliance, which are not a big factor in Tshwane, are a big factor in Johannesburg, and they have already concluded a national coalition agreement with the ANC. So Joburg is not that simple, and so for the DA to support the candidate of the third largest party, a party that is smaller than us in Johannesburg, and then to hope for the best would be quite irresponsible, because such a government will not only be a minority government, it will depend on its success on the EFF. And that is not a situation that the DA wants to put our brand and our values to. That is not what our supporters expect, and that is not a position in which we can effectively govern and ensure proper services to the residents of Johannesburg.
While I do appreciate that distinction, I want to refer to a statement made by the party leader, John Steenhuisen, a bit earlier on today. He said that putting together a minority coalition government in Johannesburg would be the subject to the whims and demands of the EFF. It seems that the DA will not consider a coalition with the Red Berets or avoid another chaotic agreement like what he referred to earlier.
Well, it's exactly that. And the point is that even if the EFF is not formally part of a coalition negotiation or a coalition agreement in Johannesburg,
right,
the fact that you have a minority government or the prospect of a minority government almost invites them in as shadow directors of such a government. And the DA does not want to be part of a coalition agreement and then depend on the EFF, and the EFF, quite frankly, have got a terrible reputation when it comes to clean governance. They are the absolute ideological opposite of the DA. We understand that ActionSA and Herman Mashaba have got a good relationship with the EFF. We do not. We do not want to touch the EFF with a barge pole. And so it's very important for us to draw that clear distinction and not to compromise ourselves by allowing the EFF to enter government in Johannesburg in the shadows. In that situation, it's far better for the DA to put up our candidate, win or lose by ourselves without being tied to a coalition agreement. And if we lose, we will go back as a disciplined organization to the opposition benches, and we will be an effective opposition, a devastatingly effective opposition, especially given the way that the ANC has been weakened. And that will be a far better prospect and a far better way to serve the residents of Johannesburg.
So come Monday, you'll be presenting Paul Palatsi as the party's preferred mayoral candidate for the city of Johannesburg. But it would seem that there was an agreement that was set to place your mayoral candidate in Tshwane, that's Randall Williams, also depending on these or the success of these talks that you've been having with other parties, including ActionSA. Does this new development now compromise those talks?
Well, our decision is that we can't support a coalition government in Johannesburg. We can still form a coalition in Tshwane. So those negotiations are open until the meeting in Tshwane happens. But in the absence of clear agreement, that is the intention of the DA. I don't think we're saying to ActionSA or anybody else, to get lost. The talks are still open. We're just saying, honestly, this is our position.
Right.
There is an opportunity for Tshwane. There is no opportunity for Johannesburg.
So if I understand you correctly, this does not mark the end of the road, basically, for the talks that you will be having with ActionSA, should they come to the table?
We have been very open, and our door of negotiation is still open, but on the position of forming a coalition in Johannesburg, that is the DA's position. We're not going to change on that. But we do see an opportunity for a very successful 50% plus one majority coalition in Tshwane.
And just as we wrap up, please give us a sense of how these coalition talks have been, how they've been taking place, and just your sense of it so far.
So it's a very tricky situation because the DA has not taken the stance of commenting on the negotiations as other parties have on a blow-by-blow basis.
Right. We
very much felt that, negotiating in good faith means pretty much keeping our mouths shut for most of the time, and allowing differences of opinion to be resolved at the negotiating table. We believe that in certain instances, some of the other parties have been premature in their pronouncements, but we understand that's part of the game, and we still believe that successful coalitions can be concluded despite differences and despite different personalities and so forth. So it's a new type of situation for South Africa, but it's very important that we get it right, because in 2024, these kind of coalition negotiations will be par for the course, and not just in a few metros or provinces, but we believe as DA in the country as well.
Well, Mr. Cilliers, Mr. Brink, thank you very much for your time. That was the DA's Cilliers Brink giving us some perspective there on those ongoing coalition talks. Now, the DA said they will not support Herman Mashaba's candidature for Johannesburg mayor.